Welcoming to the channel for the first time, he is one part of Cespedes Family Barbecue on Twitter and co-host of the Baseball Barbie Cast from Yahoo Sports, which has become one of the most prominent shows in baseball media. He has also written about baseball for Yahoo, MLB.com's Cut 4, and Fox Sports. Jordan Shusterman, welcome to the channel.
Thank you so much for having me. That was an efficient intro. You definitely hit the high points, and yeah, excited to be here. Obviously, this is a interesting time of year as we all wait for things to happen.
Yep.
And in the Mariners' case, I'm sure stuff will start to move here in a little bit.
Hopefully, I'm really ready to finally get a little bit of like answers to what the 2025 roster is going to be. It's hard waiting this like month and a half after the season ends to just nothing happens at all. I mean, you're seeing some people with like getting non-tendered or whatever, which is like, it can be interesting, but I mean, I'm ready to get to the meat and potatoes. So
They didn't even add anyone. They didn't even protect anyone from the Rule 5. So we didn't
yeah,
even have like that wave of transactions to talk about Jimmy Joyce or whatever.
right, right.
So, but it's fine. I mean, as someone lucky enough to do this for a living, I have plenty keeping me busy. But
Yeah,
um, I guess I would also just remind Mariners fans, you're not the only ones. Basically, every team that is not the Angels has done nothing. So
yeah.
we can all be patient.
For sure, for sure. It's tough, but we will get through it. So, first, I want to start with a few questions more about you specifically before we get into the Mariners stuff. So, I was looking into your guys' old blog before you really took national attention.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so I noticed that you guys have a particular affinity for unique baseball names. That came up a lot in your
Oh,
old blog.
yes.
You attended
Mhm.
the College of Wooster, which is based in Wooster, Ohio. So where you earned a bachelor's degree in communications. So prior to attending said college, were you aware that Wooster, Ohio was the home of old baseball players named Ginger Clark, Guy Hecker, Roger Peckinpah, and Kaiser Wilhelm?
So Kaiser Wilhelm and Roger Peckinpah, yes. I did not know those first two. I'll have to familiarize myself with the stylings of what was that, Ginger
So
Clark?
Ginger Clark was the first one, which he has an interesting little career because his career was one singular game in the major leagues.
Oh, one of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so he played in
So
1902.
here's the thing though. The name Ginger Clark in 1902 is not that remarkable.
Yeah,
As you just mentioned, I mean, we had Kaiser Wilhelm, which
yeah,
comes with all kinds of historical connotations.
yeah,
Crazy Schmidt was like another, like, talk about now, I'm doing thinking Germany things. Germany, I mean, believe Crazy Schmidt also went by Germany Schmidt, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Germany Schmidt. Like there was some wacky. Now we're going back into like the 19th century, but
yeah.
our standard when we were going on our original podcast every week or whenever we recorded, it was not every week at the time, and we did these baseball reference battles. We called them the BREF battle, where we would basically bring three amazing names every week, every pod. We would dig and find the Kaiser Wilhelms and the
Mhm.
the Shadrach McHooverters and the Pretzels Getzians and all these ridiculous names that you have to really know where to look on Baseball Reference. Ginger Clark's like might as well be Joe
Yeah,
Smith at that point. So I appreciate the Worcester connection.
yeah.
That I can definitely, and especially someone who now is living in Ohio again. Worcester is still near and dear to my heart, but uh, the name itself, Ginger,
Yeah,
we can do better. We can do better than that.
yeah, I agree. It's just a matter of I still those are it's not like, oh, this famous guy from Worcester or old
Yeah.
baseball player was like Joe Smith. I'm like, oh, from modern standards, it's an interesting name, and
I mean, hey,
yeah,
Roger Peckinpah is not an insignificant. I mean, this dude won an MVP. I mean, this
yeah,
is not an insignificant player.
yeah,
So for him to be from Worcester is pretty cool.
yeah, and
So
I
good. That
thought
was good research. I was not
yeah.
expecting that.
Yeah, and I wanted to say that Guy Hecker had one of the most insane years in 1884. Okay.
Okay,
He
yeah.
had pitched in 75 games in 670.2 innings pitched, had 385 strikeouts for a
Uh,
1.80 ERA. Uh,
See,
yeah, they made him
this
different back
is
then.
what what is it? What has happened to the game I love? You
Right.
know,
Right.
where are my guys throwing 72 complete games?
Yeah.
We celebrate the likes of Logan Gilbert out here leading the league in innings with 214 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's light work.
Yeah.
My guy over here, Guy Hecker, who is apparently buried in Worcester. I should honestly go pay my respects.
You should.
I should drive down and be like, this hoss throwing
He did.
670
Did he have a titanium
innings.
UCL? Like, did Tommy John just not exist back then, or UCLs not exist back then?
Um, you also have to remember they were throwing like 50 miles an hour.
Okay,
So
yeah, that
that
makes
is
sense.
part of it. I think for me, it's that. And then it's also like it's not like they were striking anybody out, although he did lead the league in strikeouts, I guess, this
Yes.
year. It was only 5 per 9, which is not super awesome.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, this is a great season. Guy Hecker. No, this is another new one for me. So
There you
you've
go.
now given me another wonderful distraction to get into as soon as we hop off this pod.
Exactly. So you were featured in the 2019 Topps Allen and Ginter collection. So you have your own
Yes.
baseball card, which is pretty cool. I noticed when I looked this up, there is a baseball card of you that has a relic of a piece of jersey on it. Uh, what is the piece of jersey from?
Dude, you are digging into. Okay, so the reason I'm free, I don't even know if this is on video. I'm sorry. I'm trying to find the Allen and Ginter card. I mean, you could look it up, whatever. I
Yeah,
have a bunch of
I'll
those
put it on
copies.
the screen since I'm editing this.
So I have a bunch of the copies of the Allen and Ginter.
Hmm.
That's not that exciting. I mean, it's cool,
Yeah.
obviously, for that we were in that set. Um, but the relic cards
Hmm.
this is a very, very important. I'm so glad you mentioned this because I have not, although I guess they probably are on eBay, and if I wanted to buy one, I could.
I think that's where I
Um,
saw it. It could have been just Google
okay,
Images,
yeah,
but
yeah, but
yeah.
I have not purchased or I've not seen one of those in person. I don't believe.
Okay.
But again, I should. I'm sure it costs like 30 cents on eBay. But you are asking the right question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me this.
Yeah, I would be surprised. But yeah, I mean, it said piece of jersey, and I'm like, what could that possibly what jersey
Is
could this possibly be from?
okay. So if I recall correctly, again, when they asked us to do this part, it's like this is the goofiest thing of all time, right?
Yeah.
But think about it this way. So normally when it's relics,
Hmm.
it as it's jerseys, right? Because it's game worn jerseys.
Yep.
I don't play baseball. I have not played baseball. I have not worn a jersey that means anything. But what do Jake and I wear all the time? We wear jerseys.
Okay.
Very,
So
very
it's a piece
different.
of
I know you're
jersey?
wearing a jersey right now. I
Yes.
respect the commitment. I do not own very many baseball jerseys. I
Yep.
don't have, I would rather spread out my commitments to cheaper t-shirts so
Okay.
that I can represent more players from more teams.
Hmm.
Because the jersey nowadays is I mean, that's a big commitment.
It
It's like
is.
it's a real thing. So I don't know if the jersey you're wearing right now is a specific player or not.
It's
We can get
Ken
into
Griffey
that.
Jr., which happy birthday to him. So
Love
there you
that.
go.
Hard to say that's a bad pick. That's
Yep.
like about as safe as it gets, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? Because that's the other part of it. It's like, especially nowadays with the Mariners, I mean, you got to be careful who you're
Yep.
committing to because they might be gone, the next day.
Yep.
All of that is a preface to say, okay, so I remember we are like, all right, well, we got to pick a jersey that we want to like commemorate.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, the jersey I selected was a Boston Red Sox Yoenis Cespedes.
Okay. But like the
And the
blue Boston Red Sox, because it was
the
blue.
blue Boston Red Sox. And the reason was my logic, I don't know what Jake picked or if he picked a different one or whatever.
Mhm.
My personal logic was I would like to forget that this ever happened.
Okay. Yeah. And obviously Cespedes is like, your
He's our
guys' whole
guy.
branding. So it makes sense.
But it was something about like that. Those 50 games in Boston were just so not. I mean, it didn't matter. It was very like low
Yeah.
stakes, but it was like there was something funny to me about shredding that one, and I
Yeah,
was like, I felt like it had to be a Cespedes one,
for sure.
and I just thought that was funny because it
Okay.
was basically the only time he until the very end where he was bad and irrelevant was on the Red Sox. That was the only time. Other than that, I mean, Tigers, awesome. Mets, awesome. World Series, awesome. A's, awesome. Like that's our guy.
Of course.
Red Sox was not a stint that was especially memorable. So there you go.
That's good to know.
I believe that is that is what that is.
Okay. Well,
great question. Awesome question.
Awesome. Yeah. So the last more personal one. So on May 1st of 2024, you tweeted, "This is not based on any actual research whatsoever, but anecdotally, it feels like ever since Felix threw his perfect game on a Wednesday afternoon, the Mariners are 0-264 with a negative 1,543 run differential on Wednesday afternoon. I manually looked this up to give you the answer to your question."
Chance, bro.
I manually looked this up.
Oh my
thank
God.
you, Baseball Reference.
So you were, I mean, obviously, like I sort of know how it'd go out. And I remember when I tweeted this, I was like, do I want to actually look this up? And then I was like, nah, I'll just say it's anecdotal and just make it a funny, hyperbolic tweet, which I stand by. But now you're going to bring facts and tell me that I'm an idiot.
Well, okay, so it was obviously not as exaggerated as you thought. So the Mariners on Wednesday day games are 60-61 since Felix's perfect game, with a run differential of negative 43. So you're right on the negative part. The best win was 2 Wednesday day games after Felix's perfecto, with a 12-run win against the Angels on October 3rd of 2012. Their worst loss was by 13 runs at the hands of the Rangers on August 31st, 2016.
So what I am hearing is a minus 43 run differential at like roughly a 500 record is kind of compelling evidence in my case.
It is, because most of their wins were only by 1 or 2 runs, but there was just a few of those losses that were really bad on Wednesday day games that I think just weighed it down. So, but now you have the answer.
So again, I just have to say, that was, when did I tweet this? May
1st of 2024.
You know what this was? This is when this is early in the season, and they had taken the first 2 against Atlanta after winning a series against Arizona. And it was like, okay. Like I remember waking up that Wednesday and it was like, oh, they're going to sweep the Braves?
Yeah.
Here they come. And then there was just some dumb nonsense that happened. Oh, this is an Emerson Hancock start. Chris Sale, good timing.
Yeah. I remember Chris Sale getting like literal inches off the outside of the plate, and his slider was going nuts that day.
I'm seeing 2 errors in this box score, which makes me think that there was some nonsense happening.
Potentially.
That was not helping Emerson Hancock. So I see like an error and then a run scored on a walk, and then the next inning there was another just like dropped fly ball. So that tells me that it wasn't just like, oh, they were losing, right? There was clearly some goofy thing happening that prompted me to be like, wow, Wednesday afternoons suck.
Yeah. Well, they clearly don't suck as bad. They don't suck as bad as you remember, but
bro,
still
that's wild that they've even
Yeah. So
that's great work.
Thank you.
I'm impressed. I'm kind of like, dude, what the hell? Like,
well, thankfully, Baseball Reference has it to where if you look at the results for each year, you can filter it by day games. And so I looked at the day games, looked at all the Wednesdays, and logged it out in Google Sheets. So we now have the answer to that tweet there. So
hey, do me a favor. Let's leave those results here.
Yeah. Let's
let that tweet live so that I can bring it back up the next time they get pantsed on a Wednesday day game.
The next time they lose by a lot on a Wednesday day game, I will tweet at you and be like, maybe you were onto something. It took an extra,
because what you said 60 and 61.
60 and 61, yeah.
So if they win the next one, back to 500.
Yep.
So I just need them to keep losing on those days, I think, for me to feel good.
Yeah.
But you know what? Here's what I'll say. I respect this well, actually. This is pretty good.
Yeah.
No, normally I'd be like, come on, like let's relax. But this is good work. So
thank you.
Again, only possible because Baseball Reference is the best, but
yes, that's true.
I appreciate the dirty work you did there.
I had to. I was intrigued, so I had to figure it out for myself. So So yeah, now going into the Mariner centric questions. In August of this year, you wrote an article detailing the relationship of Cal Raleigh and Logan Gilbert, which has been really helpful in a video I'm currently working on right now. Wanting to focus about Cal for a second, how important do you think it is for this club to have a player with both the skill and almost veteran-like leadership, especially at such a pivotal position? How important do you think he is for the future of this club?
Yeah, so this is just kind of a thing that I say often when talking about this position, but of course, we can apply it to Cal in particular. I say this often when I'm just kind of surveying the landscape of the league and looking at teams' rosters. Knowing who your catcher is such a big deal.
Yep.
That just goes such a long way for any org for so many reasons because so much goes through that individual. That's true if he's like pretty good,
Yep.
like it's just nice to know who the guy is that you like. That's our catcher, and we don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
If that guy is an average hitter and is like a good defender, that's awesome. You're in great shape. You can fill out the rest of the roster around that because you don't have to worry about that, right?
Yep.
To have the catcher be one of your best players is now another level of luxury that cannot be, overstated enough. I mean, it is
Yep.
such a huge deal. And I think for him in particular, what is so compelling is that he has managed to become this defensive savant.
Yeah.
Um, and in some ways, it makes all the sense in the world because he's, the son of a coach who grew up in the game. But physically, and how scouts were talking about him as an amateur, it was not the expectation at all. It was like, great, this guy can catch, which is impressive because he's huge and he can hit. But let's just have him be stand back there, and then if he can hit us 20 home runs and be a competent defender, that there's value in that too, right? But for him to become this much of an impact player on both sides is truly kind of astonishing. And when you combine that with having to be managing not just any pitching staff, but this pitching staff as good as it is, I mean, what more could you possibly ask for besides, I guess, oh, he hits 220. But like,
Yeah.
who cares? I mean, literally, like you can't be asking for him to be doing. He is impacting the game in quite literally every other way that is not batting average and strikeouts, right?
Yeah.
And so yes, like when we talk about players and oh, they strike out too much, or batting average is low, sometimes it can be a problem. Sometimes it does go too far in one direction. And like, yeah, no, it actually is a problem that you're striking out all the time, right? But when you're Cal Raleigh and you are bringing so much else to the table, you're leading all catchers in home runs every year. You're driving in a ton of runs. You are still drawing a ton of walks. And you are this awesome defensive catcher who's controlling the running game and framing great and managing this ridiculous, amazing pitching staff.
Yep.
I mean, it's just like he is the last guy you should ever be complaining about batting average, literally, because of what else he's bringing to the table. So that's Cal Raleigh. He is spectacular. Although I will be honest, the last few days I've been thinking a lot more about Logan Gilbert
Well,
because
that's a
of
perfect
his
segue.
place.
I'm about to
Yeah,
ask you about
so
Logan
I'll let
Gilbert.
you do that because you're the host. But
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah.
talking about Logan Gilbert, he was obviously the second part of that article as well. And for the last few seasons, the rotation in general has pretty much been talked about as Luis Castillo being the ace, Kirby being the number two, and Gilbert as a close but somewhat underrated and underappreciated number three. For me personally, since I started watching the org and paying attention at the end of 2022, I felt Logan seems to have the potentially highest ceiling out of the three. We obviously saw Logan take the big jump in 2024 and basically leapfrog George a little bit. So, out of the two, who do you feel has the higher ceiling, George Kirby or Logan Gilbert?
I feel like I have answered this exact question on Mariners podcast for the last 4 years,
Probably. Yeah.
which is, again, that's not your fault. Like, it's still a good question.
Yeah.
So I don't blame you for asking me again. Obviously, recency bias has influenced the answer to that each of the last 4 years,
Mhm.
even as, of course, Gilbert came up before Kirby. I think what's interesting Logan's issue before this year, and it was still sort of an issue this year, was the homers, right?
Yep.
And he still allowed a good number of home runs this year. What he got just so much better about, again, for him to uptick the strikeouts even by 3 or 4% because his secondary weapons have gotten so much better, like the splitter and whatnot. That's what's kind of unlocked because the bulk has always been there. The dude hasn't missed a start since he was called up, which is just an amazing achievement in this era of pitching. The only other guy really who's been as durable as him since he came up is Nola. I mean, there's a couple other like Barrios. It's a short list of guys who have basically posted every 5 days, right?
Yep.
But him unlocking more strikeout stuff this year is why, and we know they're both extremely cerebral, able to, and so part of me is like, okay, well, who's to say George Kirby can't find that swing and miss pitch? I think he can, and I think Kirby's floor is still probably higher because we know he's just never going to walk anybody ever. It's going to depend on when and where those balls in play are, happening for George, because unlike someone like Logan Webb, Kirby's ground ball rate isn't that elite, and so he is still risking allowing hard contact in certain ballparks. That's fine in Seattle, but with certain defensive alignments and in certain ballparks, it's your ERA, it's gonna be pretty hard to sustain ERAs that low, and that's why we saw it kind of go a little bit backwards this year. And he allowed. I mean, I know a part of it is because he made every start, but he allowed the most hits in the league, right?
Yep.
And so some of that is bad luck, but we also know that he allows a lot of contact, and that's probably not going to change. It could, but Logan's development and how much he's changed over the last few years to kind of incrementally improve every part of his arsenal is so impressive. I don't want to rule out Kirby as having still Cy Young potential. I think he does. This is a good problem to have for Seattle. You don't actually have to worry about it because they're both on the team.
For sure.
And by the way, you can have these same fun arguments we were, and now it's a little different because of the bulk, but you could have the same arguments about Miller and Wu, right? Where Castillo fits into this, I don't even know anymore, right? He's just like off to the side, like, oh yeah, he's there too. It's like, many teams would love to have Luis Castillo, and he's just like kind of over there. People and Mariners fans get so, oh my gosh, how greedy. It's like, oh, Luis, he's not doing it. It's like, I mean,
Are we
pretty good
spoiled?
pitcher. Yeah. Like, again, and I understand the standards are there. And yes, there have certainly been some unfortunate, poorly timed bad outings from him, and that's fine. I know it's not that he shouldn't be held to a high standard, but man, that's a hell of a pitcher still to have as like your de facto four if you're really going by true talent and what you're expecting. So all of that is to say, I think Gilbert has what he just showed me, that he is going to a more consistent ability to get strikeouts, makes me think that I would lean towards him because he also offers the same bulk. But Kirby could prove that wrong very quickly if he can find a weapon where he's missing bats more consistently, because he just hasn't found that yet.
Yep. Agreed. So we have to talk about the offseason and potential additions. So basically the obvious needs are in the infield, with a smaller need of some bullpen help for sure. Players like Gleyber Torres, Hai Sung Kim from the KBO have been talked about, strong potential options. Today, Adam Jude of the Seattle Times dropped an article saying it's very likely the Mariners will sign either Justin Turner or Carlos Santana. So yeah, are there any players that you think outside of those potentially are kind of sneaky possibilities for the Mariners to target either via trade or free agency?
Yeah, so Adam also had a good kind of story surveying the trade landscape, especially looking at more of those second and third base options. The guys he mentioned: Bohm, Horner, Lau, Lux, Rogers, Brendan Rodgers of the Rockies, Brendan Donovan, the Cardinals. Horner's the one I've been kind of pounding the table for the last few years, or at least the last year or so, as he seemed like someone that was maybe not going to make sense in Chicago anymore. Bohm is very intriguing. Bohm sort of fits perfectly and is certainly trending in the most encouraging direction. I know he had a very bad end to the season. And one thing that I also struggle with, obviously, when looking at hitters that Seattle should be acquiring is just like, oh, well, it's a bad fit for Seattle. Well, guess what? So is everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, is that an excuse to say no one's going to hit in Seattle? So just worry about someone that can, give you an 800 OPS on the road. Like, are we at that point? I don't think so. Like, that's kind
Yeah.
of defeatist. And there are hitters that can succeed there, but there's probably ones that are a little bit more likely to than others.
Hmm.
And if you're chasing guys, what is it suppressing, right? And I've looked into this in the park factor. I mean, it's suppressing everything, right? But if you pull up the park factors, is it just home runs? Like, do we not want to be chasing guys that you are hoping are going to hit 25 home runs? Or in that case, Nico Horner, he ain't hitting 25 home runs anywhere.
Yeah.
And so that his kind of offensive profile, not to mention what he's bringing you defensively as a floor, is very encouraging. But again, like Seattle, like the issues as like Teoscar's talked about, and I don't know what the status is of like the batter's eye and the stuff about like, strikeouts, the strikeout part factor is through the roof.
Yeah.
Some of that is also like the Mariners pitchers are good, but I know it's not, I know that's not how par factors work, but
Yeah.
like it doesn't feel like a total accident. But the point being that like if strikeouts are an issue, okay, we already knew those were going to be an issue for some of the players that they've brought in.
Hmm.
Horner less so. If Horner suddenly starts striking out all the time, then yeah, there probably is something wrong with the ballpark.
Yeah.
But I feel like guys like him and Donovan, who aren't necessarily relying on power, yes, this was sort of what you were hoping for with Adam Frazier, but these are guys who are younger and I think still, honestly, more track record of success in that sense. So I do like Donovan and Horner a lot in that sense. I have to imagine Donovan would cost more. And then Bohm would cost a lot. The one thing I do feel strongly about, and maybe this has kind of become obvious because the Mariners have sort of come out and say this, is don't touch the pitching. If you're going to trade, especially if we're talking about Bohm and they're asking about a Brian Wu or whatever, like, don't do it. They've been honest about this. And I said this last year too, like, this is your superpower.
Yep.
And trading from that strength just doesn't make sense. And I'd rather them trade almost any prospect, to be honest. And
Yeah.
it's not that I don't love hugging the prospects too. But this is the time to go out and improve your major league club. And yeah, it's obviously what's possible. For these younger hitters, and maybe those hitters are the answers in the future, but we can't be waiting for 2026 at this point. Like, this team is too good right now to not try, to not be getting good major league options right now. So I Horner's the one that I've been kind of stuck on as one that I like the most. And I think Bohm makes sense too, because I don't know how many players I mean, there are definitely a lot of teams that could use him. But again, like the Mariners are now in position. There was a while when it was like, okay, they could trade from their pitching because their farm's not very good. That's not true anymore.
Yeah.
They can trade from the farm. I know people don't, oh no, look at his OPS and Modesto. I know.
All right.
I love the nuts too. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
wearing an Everett Aqua Sox hat. It's fun. It's cool. Like you gotta try things here, right? And so
Hmm.
that's what I think they're gonna end up doing. And what that really costs is remains to be seen. And maybe sometimes it ends up being a player you don't expect. They've been able to make trades, as we just saw for Randy at the deadline. They're trading players that were only relevant for a very brief amount of time because of how good they got very quickly with Seattle, with Hopkins and Aiden Smith. So now those guys might turn out to be awesome, and we can relitigate that if we need to. But the point is that there might even be players that we don't know that other teams value that are good enough to get a Nico Horner, to get an Alec Bohm, to get a Gavin Lux or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing to remember, or even Brendan Donovan. So that's another thing to remember as we kind of consider these things.
Yep. So we do not know the rosters for 2025, as we mentioned earlier. We are just about to get into hot stove season. So with that said, though, what do you feel like should be reasonable expectations for the Mariners in 2025? Whether it's they're standing in the AL West, making the playoffs, not making the playoffs, how far they maybe get if they do make the playoffs. Like, what do you feel like, especially with the team that has missed out by one game 2 years in a row now? Yeah, where are you feeling? Even though we don't know who's going to necessarily be on the 2025 roster for sure yet.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have made the totally reasonable argument that's like you need to be building a team that is projected to win 93 games instead of 85 and hoping for the best. And I think that's valid. I can't really say that that's wrong. I also do think that we do have to keep remembering that them being as close as they have been is a reminder of that the team's pretty good.
Yeah.
And so you still have to you still have to do the right things and make those next steps. But it might also just be as simple as JP Crawford being good again.
Yeah.
I mean, like there are some internal things that if they change again, and maybe it ends up being offset by the pitching being slightly less amazing, very possible. Or healthy, less healthy too. That's another thing to obviously be terrified of for the Mariners. Let's
Yep.
just be real here.
Yeah.
But there's still a good there's a good core here. It's just like, okay, what is that next thing? And I think that they have been extremely clear. Like there's no secret what they're going to try to do. And I think whether they do it via trade or free agency, now there's not that many free agency options. When they talk about payroll going up, they're going to get expensive in ARB no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's part of the process, and that's what you get for your young players being really talented and good.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. That's fine. I don't know if there is an obvious free agent that fixes everything, but I would say that if they choose to, I think it'll be interesting. They've identified, right, second, third, and first. You just
Yep.
mentioned earlier, okay, let's say Santana or Turner is one of those. Okay, let's just plug them in. If they add an actual everyday player at second and third, that would surprise me and have me feel a lot better, though, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. However, based on the way that DePoto talked on the Buster Only podcast, it sounds like they feel like Dylan Moore is one of those players. And that's fine. That's again also part of the luxury of him. Where that leaves Josh Rojas, I have no idea. But how good that next infielder is will definitely make a difference. But I don't think it's the most important thing. The most important things are already on the team.
Yeah.
That is a fact. And as fun as this time of the year is, and while we should care and they should be trying to get better, and yes, it'd be awesome if they even pretended to want to get Juan Soto or all these things. Of course, I agree that there's all reasons to be mad at ownership. The most important players on the Mariners are already on the Mariners. That there is no world where that is not true. And so we have to remember that as you go into next season. It's not as fun. It's not as fun to feel that way because you want to feel like the guy you just added in the offseason is like, that's the missing piece. The way that we felt about Jorge Polanco in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I did.
And not only was he disappointing, but it wasn't just because of him. We know that. And Teoscar, right? I thought those moves were sensible and good. They ended up being disappointing in different ways, but still the shortcomings generally had more to do with the key pieces that were already there.
Yep.
And I think that that's still true. I would also remind everybody that this will be the first time Randy Arozarena shows up to spring training with the Mariners, and that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm assuming he will not be traded. I feel pretty good about that, but that's also like it's not that's a real thing, So all of that is to kind of say they will do things. They have to do things. They know that. They've acknowledged that. They will bring in at least one, I think, everyday kind of player, the way that they had the last few years. But we just have to remember that the most important players there are already there. That's Julio. That's JP Crawford. And that's, those are the guys JP for sure. And then, the Mitches and some bullpen guys that are, I honestly, the bullpen additions I think should not be overlooked here because I would feel better if they can, because that was not in a good situation by the end of the year. And if we're expecting Santos to actually be something,
hopefully
I would love for that to be true, but I'm certainly not counting on it. So I would not overlook the bullpen as being a very important thing that I hope that they try and address in a somewhat significant way.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Julio because obviously he's the biggest player on the team, the most important player on the team. We saw him take a step back last year, like a pretty clear step back. He had a good stretch after he came back from his ankle injury. But generally it was very obviously a down year for him. The same way we talked about 2023 is feeling like a down year for him, even though it was a 30-30 season. This one truly was, and you saw guys like Bobby Wood Jr. kind of passing by, even though they are usually talked about in unison. That's not really the case anymore. So going into 2025, I think this is maybe one of the more important seasons for Julio's career, potentially even in hindsight when we look back at it later on. So, are you in the camp of feeling worried about his potential issues? Because some people can be, or are you in the camp of, we know he's talented, he has the tools there, he's going to figure it out?
Not worried.
Yeah.
Not even really. I think that it's hard with him to like, yeah, no, it was bad, but it was really just like really bad for the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it was, I mean, obviously it wasn't as good as, his August and whatnot in 2023.
Hmm.
But pretty good September.
Yeah.
Pretty
Those
good
last two
September.
months were good. It was just
Yes.
that those first
Yes.
4 or 5,
The
not so
first three,
much.
and it was a bad April. It was an okay May, and then it got worse in June, and that's
Yeah.
really where you kind of knew that, just from an approach standpoint, like this has always been the risk. I mean, this is when he's looked bad, even when he has been good the first 2 seasons of his career. But like, I mean, first of all, let's also, as always, I say it, I've literally talked about this every Mariners podcast I've ever been on. The fact that he is an amazing center fielder is such a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, there's a world where this player is like a big right fielder, like, Eloy Jimenez or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh God, this is like catastrophically bad because this is the only thing we care about is that he can hit.
Hmm.
That's not the case. So the fact that he can still contribute on the bases and defensively is not a small thing. And then ultimately, I just think that like the talent is so, when he's going, he's one of the best players in the sport.
Yeah.
And that's the fact that he still showed us that even in spurts this year is a reminder that it's obviously still in there.
Yeah.
And he's already talking. I mean, Dipoto talked about that too. Like, it's just going to be about not starting terribly and then not feeling like you're the only good player on the team.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that, maybe, especially for the first few months, right? But then in the middle of the summer, it was just, it had just gotten so bad collectively that obviously the bad version of Julio that's swinging at everything, that looks, it's a bad version, right? There's different kinds of like lack of productivity
Hmm.
that aesthetically looks worse,
Yeah.
even if like the slash line is the same, certain kinds of bad hitters are more maddening to watch. And when you're chasing more than almost any other hitter in the league, that is something that fans viscerally react to in a way that the average player who's just grounding out or
Yeah.
flying out, it's not the same thing. But then when you go in and you look at, like, he was still hitting the ball really hard. And he, again, like I said, like there were still stretches where he looked like one of the best players in the league.
Hmm.
There's still pressure on him, and the expectations should be high because we know the talent is there, and you want that complete MVP season. And I would say that I expect that to happen. I'm not
Yeah.
saying it'll absolutely happen in 2025, but he's not. What I said earlier is, yes, he players like him are the most important players. That's true, but I'm not worried that he's going to show up next year and have a 690 OPS. Like, I don't think this is like he's trending definitively backwards. I just think that he's God, like the fact that he still hit 270 is
Yeah.
unbelievable.
It is.
Like there's parts of his game. It's like, man, like, was it that bad? Like, yes, because it looked so bad. It looked so bad.
Yeah.
So I'm optimistic, and I know that he's still contributing so much, and I hope that he can kind of unlock that more consistent production. And I
Hmm.
think that he will.
Okay. Very cool. Well, this is the last question for you to end this out. Okay. You almost got your degree in geology before changing into communications. Are you more?
Where did I possibly say that
I
quote?
don't recall, but I found that. So last
Oh,
question.
what? No, man. Where would I have said? I mean, it's just true.
Yeah,
This is accurate.
yeah. So
I did take, so here's what happened. So I took oceanography as
nice.
a
Okay.
freshman.
I'm a marine bio guy. Like I didn't get a degree, but I enjoyed it a lot in high
There you
school.
go. That's why you're a Mariners fan, right?
Kind of a little bit. That's a little bit of the
Oh,
other. There's geographically I'm close, but yes.
okay. So, Professor Shelley Judge, shouts out to Dr. Judge. She went by SJ, but she was, I mean, this is 2013. So this is before Aaron Judge is in my life. This is the
Yeah.
first like judge that's like in my life. And she was the best. She was, and honestly, she was the problem because she was so great where I was like, I just want to be a geo major.
Yeah. Nice.
She was just, and so then I took a couple other classes and then I took a 200 level class with her spring of my freshman year, and there was a lab component.
Hmm.
Disaster. I could not keep. I was this was that was the end of my science kind of experience.
Yeah.
I'm married to a chemistry professor, so she has got that side of the world covered for
There
sure.
you go. Yep.
But geo, yeah, the lab kicked my ass. I ended up writing a really good paper on volcanoes um, that like saved my grade, but I still got like a C, and that was it. That was my geo
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Now, all of that is to say, what could that possibly be a prelude to your question? I'm very excited.
I was going to ask you, are you more of a sedimentary, metamorphic, or igneous kind of guy?
So I'm trying to think what gave me the most trouble when we were doing.
You wrote a good paper about volcanoes, which would be igneous.
Yes. So I'll
So
have to go with that because that
saved
saved
your
my
grade.
ass. I basically
Yeah.
it was about super volcanoes specifically.
Oh,
In
okay. So like
fact,
Yellowstone and stuff.
you want how about this? Mariners fans, and again, I know you said you've only been a fan for a couple of years, but you should know who Jeff Sullivan is. Do you know who Jeff Sullivan is? If you look out landing OG, and a
Okay.
big
Yeah.
reason why I started following the Mariners, now works for the Rays. Also a very big geo enthusiast.
Okay.
That's like
Gotcha.
a big part of his non-baseball life. And
Yeah.
I remember emailing with Jeff Sullivan about my super volcano paper, just
Nice.
because I was like, Jeff, give me some words of encouragement, my guy. Like I might fail this class.
So are you gonna go to Yellowstone someday to visit the
I
biggest
hope
super
so.
volcano?
Yeah, man. Now I got to go find that paper because it was good, but
Yeah.
super volcanoes. I remember reading about super volcanoes and being like, "Whoa,
It's
this would be
crazy.
bad. This would be
Yeah.
bad, guys."
It's like
Like
if this
I
thing
don't know.
explodes, we're screwed in like
This
all of
is
North
this
America.
is. I mean, listen, there are some bad natural disasters, global warming. There's certainly things to be concerned about.
Yeah.
None of that stuff is even close to what would happen if we are dealing with a super volcano.
Yeah,
So
for
I'll
sure.
go with igneous, I guess is my answer.
Okay. That makes a lot of
So
sense.
good way to close it out.
So, well, I appreciate you taking the time to be on the channel. It was a fun one. So, yeah, thank you for being on it. Obviously, if you guys are listening to this, you probably already knew who Jordan was before this, but
Oh man,
go check
now
out
you know way more than you ever could have.
go check out Cespedes Family Barbecue. Go check out the Baseball Barbiecast on Yahoo. Obviously, you can find him writing articles throughout the year as well. So, yeah, anything else that you want to plug before we go?
J_Shusterman_
Yep.
on Twitter if you're still there. Jordan Shusterman on Blue Sky.
There we go.
That's where I post about the Mariners, so that's why I'm mentioning that here.
Yep.
And listen to Baseball Barbercast. I think our podcast is good. It's 3 times a week, even in the off season, and we're having a great time. And me and Jake Mintz are proud of what we do over there, and we think that you would enjoy it. So that's my plug for the pod.
Awesome.
But thanks for having me. This was
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.